Hi, welcome to today's webinar, How to Add Propane Storage Affordably Despite the Steel Shortage, brought to you by LP Gas Magazine and our sponsor of the event, One Tank. Before we get started, I want to let you know that today's webinar will be recorded. You are currently in a listen-only mode. A recording of this webinar will be posted to lpgasmagazine.com/webinars and will also be emailed to you tomorrow. At this time, I'd like to acquaint you with the ways in which you can participate during today's presentation. Please notice the Q&A panel at the left-hand side of your console. If you have a question, type it in the panel's text box, then click Submit to place your question in queue. We encourage you to ask and enter any questions you may have for our speakers during the presentation. We will address these questions at the end of the presentation during the Q&A portion. Questions submitted during registration have already gone to our panelists and may be covered during the presentation. If you experience any technical difficulties today's event, you may use the same Q&A panel on your screen to submit your issue, and I or assistant producer Joey Ciccolini will personally assist you. You may learn about our speaker by viewing their photo, bio, and email address in the panel located on the upper left-hand side of your console. If you are logged into your social media accounts, you can use the Share This widget you'll see in the bottom left corner of the screen. Finally, at the bottom right of the console, you will find a PDF of today's presentation slides, which you can download, and a link to visit the One Tank website. I'm Aurora Harris, Content Marketing Producer for LP Gas Magazine, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Now, I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter. Today, we will be hearing from Brian Humphrey. Brian is the CEO of InSite and founder of One Tank. Brian is also an emerging leader within the technology and propane industries. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Brian. Take it away. Brian, I think you're still muted.
Whoops, sorry about that. Classic mistake during these times, huh? Can everybody hear me now? All right, perfect. Thank you, Aurora, and thank you, LP Gas Magazine, for giving us the chance to do this. And thank you all for being here and taking the time out of your day to listen to what I have to say, and hopefully we can learn a few things together here. As Aurora said, I am Brian Humphrey. And I work for a company called InSite. So you may be familiar with One Tank as the sponsor. InSite is actually the parent company behind that. InSite specializes in remote monitoring solutions for the LPG, refined fuels, and fuel oil industries. With over 100 years of combined experience, InSite offers industry-leading Skytrak Unlimited monitoring solutions, as well as the One Tank dashboard. One Tank is really the concept driving this whole thing and driving the entire topic of this particular conversation and webinar here. And combined, this creates the industry's first storage monitoring solution. And InSite is 100% American-owned and operated. InSite is often categorized as a tank monitoring company, but we prefer to be instead identified more as a technology company or a technology solutions company, because tank monitoring itself is really only a piece of the puzzle. Skytracker, so InSite sells a product called Skytracker. Skytracker is the hardware device for the tank monitoring side, and it's been around for a long time. It was the first satellite tank monitor to market here in the propane industry, and is one of the first tank monitors in general to hit the market back in the early 2000s, 2004, 2005. When Skytracker first came to market here in the propane industry. It was created by my father, who has been in the propane industry for his entire career. So he leaned on his lifelong experience in the industry to create a product that's tailored for the propane industry and for the propane marketer specifically. And in doing so, he created many firsts that really set the stage for what tank monitoring is today. A few examples of that are, plug-and-play installation, direct to satellite connectivity, meaning there's no There's nothing tethered to the end user's home. Text and email alerts, color-coded tank levels on the software side, and the end user access is another example. All of these were industry first that the team around my father and my father himself established a long time ago that really set the stage for how a lot of tank monitoring companies work still today. And we've been doing that ever since. But there's a few other pieces that we've been working on and that my father established years ago that are really coming into fruition now and can really provide some insight and some assistance into the current environment. A little bit more about me. So my father is retired now, or at least semi-retired. And since he's from the propane industry and I grew up around him, it means I grew up around propane for basically my entire life. And I've been employed here for about 8 years now. And before I was doing this, I worked for the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company. I worked in engineering there for a few years. That was my first job out of college. And I learned quite a few things from that company that has really set the stage for myself and this product and even why I'm here today. One of the first things they do when you're hired at the Ritz-Carlton is to teach you how to look for opportunities to go above and beyond for the customer and for, in that case, many times it's the hotel guests. To really teach you how to anticipate the customer's needs before they actually need them. And they really put their money where their mouth is in this case. One little known fact about the Ritz-Carlton is they will approve any Ritz-Carlton employee well over $1,000, sometimes even a couple $1,000 for each opportunity where they can go above and beyond for their guests. Because the customer experience is just that important to them. So they really want to make every memory that is taken at the Ritz-Carlton to really be a memory that lasts forever. They want to make those experiences to where the customers really want to come back. It's such a great experience to where not only do they want to come back, but now they have a story to tell to where they really want to tell other people about what happened at their great experience at the Ritz-Carlton. So this type of thinking has really worked well for them over the years as being, one of the premium brands in luxury hotels and hospitality. And that line of thinking has really been ingrained in me as well and has really taken prominence into what has led us down this path here today. It is actually a big reason why we are also developing tools to where the propane marketer and the propane industry can then extend that same type of above and beyond type of service onto the propane consumers in the industry, and to give them a reason to come back, a reason to continue to buy propane and convert to propane. And I know that the PERC and the associations are really working hard to change some of the narrative around propane because we get grouped in to other, the anti-oil conversation and political debates and all that, which I don't want to dive into too much here. But that's one of the premises as to why we're here today. So without further ado, I am excited to be here today and to show you what we've built specifically for the propane industry. With many of our founders and board members and investors, we've been in your shoes. There's a lot of talk going around right now about the upcoming winter and some potential issues that are coming our way. So we've been in your shoes. We've been through this before. And we're here to invest in you and in your legacy as the propane industry and the propane marketer. Whether you're building a family business to hand down to your children, or you are building value to eventually sell for retirement, or whether you're just doing what you can right now and you'll figure out the rest later, either way, what we discussed today will add value to your operation. It's a better way to operate, plain and simple, and it really solves a lot of industry problems. With that said, especially in these times, if there's anything that's certain in business, it's uncertainty. And I think there is a lot of uncertainty that is being felt right now, particularly. With the current environment and with steel shortages, which is the primary topic that we're talking about here. And now, as we are approaching the cusp of winter here, and is already winter in some areas, there's a lot of uncertainty about the supply issues ahead, pricing and actually getting supply where it's needed and when it's needed the most. So what we're addressing here is maybe we can bring that uncertainty a little bit down to where we can be more comfortable, be more confident, and be able to resolve some of these issues before they actually occur. Some of those problems that I'm speaking of that are still plaguing the industry, here are just a few that we have seen be occurring in either nationwide or sometimes it's isolated to a certain region, depending on weather and supply stream and demand. But just a few to name offhand are actual gas outages where customers are running out of gas, price spikes, which I think we are definitely seeing right now, bottlenecks during the peak seasons, transport loading lines. We've really seen some significant wait times for transports to get fuel from the terminals, all of which leads to customer losses and decline in industry consumers. All of this also leads to safety issues, especially gas outages and weather conditions. Not only how it affects the heating season and the consumption, but it also affects how you make your deliveries. Trying to deliver in the middle of harsh weather is another problem that keeps occurring pretty heavily, especially in certain areas of the country. So the question is, why does this happen? Well, propane consumption is largely seasonal. This is a graph from specifically following the 2013-14 winter, trying to paint the picture of what happened back then. With propane consumption being seasonal and 2/3 of the annual consumption really happens during the winter heating season between October through March. And due to high demand for residential space and agricultural grain drying, as you can see right here in the Midwest, there's a steep increase during the winter months. This means that that demand is really placed heavily on the industry's infrastructure during those few months. But the rest of the year, it really dissipates and it's pretty low and pretty sustainable throughout the rest of the year. And so you're really looking at an isolated few weeks, maybe a couple of months where the demand is really putting pressure on the infrastructure. And that's usually when the infrastructure gives way and we see a lot of the problems that we were just talking about, the gas outages, the safety issues and concerns, the price spikes, supply interruptions, etc. They usually occur during that, especially if the fall harvest and a winter starts early. So we have a late harvest and then an early winter. It really wreaks havoc, especially here where we're from in the Midwest. We've seen that a couple of times, even recently, just a couple years ago, here in the Midwest, where late harvest and early winter causes a whole host of problems. So that was the 2013-14 graph, specifically. So what are we looking at of the state of the industry here this year in 2021? So today's problem is, quite frankly, steel. That's one of the big hot topics that's been a problem for a while, and there's a number of causes for that. Demand for steel continues to grow day after day, and there are no signs of that actually slowing down or stopping. And while no one can predict the future, I certainly cannot predict the future. There are no indications of that stopping. And all indicators are pointing to a gap between supply and demand continuing to widen throughout the remainder of 2021 and extending on well into 2022. A lot of the reasons being there's pending nationwide infrastructure legislation. There's backed up demand from last year for steel across all industries, not just propane. But since we got behind because of the pandemic and shutdowns and everything, we're still playing catch up. There's a lot of back orders there. On top of that, businesses and homeowners are making improvements to accommodate post-COVID work and lifestyle changes. All that is really contributing to this continuing on. And rumor has it so far that for propane tanks specifically, there's about a 40% increase in tanks. And according to my sources, even some 500-gallon tanks are going for as much as $2,000, which is crazy to me. I've never heard of 500-gallon tanks going for that high. So what this does is it's really making a lot of propane industry marketers nervous about the upcoming winter. Propane industries are at a dangerously low level of 21%. So on top of not having shortage readily available, we are on a trajectory where we're not going to have propane inventory readily available as well. Inventories are at a dangerously low level of 20% below the 5-year average. That is from the Energy Information Administration. I've seen other sources not be quite that high, maybe 14%, 16%. But either way, it's substantially lower than where I think anybody would like it to be. So it's the lowest that it's been since the 2013-14 winter. And the U.S. propane consumption is expected to increase at least by 3.4% this winter. A lot of that is also in part due to there's a higher use of propane as a petrochemical feedstock. So that is contributing to a lot of the demand. So this will lead to outpacing expectations of below normal demand. So even if we have a warmer winter, the demand is still going to be increased because of the new use of petrochemical feedstock. So with that being said, Americans who are relying on propane for heating during this time, they quite possibly may be facing the most expensive winter in years, at least since as the prices continue to jump to the highest level we've seen since the 2013-14 winter. And this graph, just to kind of quickly explain it, so you kind of see what you're reading here. So each of these bars is 2016, 2017, 2018. The low point, the red bar, is the inventory level ending the winter on the first week of April. And then the middle part is the summer inventory build. So throughout the summer, they're building this inventory. And then the first week of September is this blue bar at the top. And so in 2016, we were at 99 million barrels entering into the winter at the first week of September, and then dropped down to 79, 73. Went back up to 97, and then 96 last year, and now we're down to 71, the lowest that it's been over 5 years. So, what's the solution? There are plenty of indications going into this winter that we may run into some of these problems again. In terms of supply, it means that as long as we rely on pipelines, rail lines, transport lines, we could be rolling the dice as far as getting supply where it's needed, when it's needed the most. If the upcoming winter is colder than normal, the question is, if you're a propane marketer, will you be able to get product where it is needed, when it's needed the most? Or maybe this year works out fine. What about next year? If your area, if your region has a warmer winter this year, you may not be able to move as much gas this season. Will that affect your pipeline ratio for next winter? Say if next winter is a cold, so we have a warm winter and then a cold winter, is your supply ratio going to be affected to where it's going to be harder to get fuel next year? So even if we make it through this year, the problems just persist down the road. Long lines at terminals caused delivery delays in 2013-14. So what has really been done to prevent another product shortage? Unless we start preparing now, industry leaders say we could be in for another supply shortage. The NPGA, PERC, and other industry leaders are working hard for answers, and they have been for years, really working the legal front, the political front, trying to work that angle for the industry. But at the end of the day, many of the industry leaders are basically saying that they are not the last line of defense and that preparations must be made at the local level. And so if supply is the problem, then what's the solution? Some might say it is more bulk storage, which perhaps that may help things and may help tailor and lessen the blow of some of these demand spikes and these demand curves. But the solution is not necessarily time or cost friendly. And adding a 30,000 gallon tank can cost nearly $100,000, sometimes more. It's probably well above that now with the price increase of steel. As we looked at earlier, there's about a 40% increase in propane tank prices. So even if you're able to add the bulk tank in this environment or in any environment, the issue still is that if you add a 30,000 gallon tank, you only have 24,000 gallons of that's actually usable space. To reference a pretty good example of this from the 2013-14 winter, myself and several other Missouri Association members attended a House hearing in Jefferson City, right in the middle of the 2013-14 polar vortex, whatever you want to call it. The objective was to explain recent product interruptions to the state and to seek state assistance in infrastructure. And one of the representatives there, Representative Funderburk, he proposed a grant of funding to add one 30,000 gallon bulk storage tank per marketer here in the state of Missouri. And Quentin Sally of Sally's Propane here in Missouri, who was chairman at the time, he spoke up and said adding 30,000 gallon tank sounds good, and that would certainly help. But by the time site approvals are attained, steel is secured, the piers are poured and cured, and the tank service piping and the electric is installed, next winter will already be here, and my problem is gone. So while the 24,000 gallons the tank actually permits, it will help, but it doesn't solve the problem. It solves the problem in a way of an aspirin prevents a heart attack. It may delay the effects, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. So you would really need a whole lot of storage to really solve the problem. But how do you do that with it being so cost and time heavy and expensive in that way? So as we look at the demand curve, I'll see if I can bring us back to this graph here. How do I do that? There we go. So coming back to this graph of the 2013-14 winter, which this is an extreme case, but we do see a similar trend line pretty much every year, where the off-season months, the demand is really low, and then in the winter, it really spikes up really high. What if that the level of usage in those off-season months were to raise up, and then the level of usage in those peak season months were able to be lessened, to where it spreads it out over the course of the year, to where maybe propane becomes a little less seasonal and a little bit more year-round, to where you're not having to run rampant with all these emergency calls in the middle of winter, the middle of ice storms, in the middle of peak season pricing when everybody's needing gas all at the same time. We're able to spread that out and dissipate it out a little bit more. As a whole, we could really be avoiding a lot of the infrastructure pitfalls that the industry runs into time and time again. So how do we do that? Well, in contrast to stark upticks in demand that are caused by extreme cold and late harvest seasons and long winters, or even COVID-19 itself, we saw some of that. If we have a more gradual delivery process that backs up into the off season, it can relieve a significant amount of pressure. And as we In the same way, a good example of this is at the beginning of COVID-19, if you all remember, we heard a lot about the concept of flattening the curve. We can flatten the curve, flatten the curve. And what they were saying was, let's take the demand off of the healthcare system. Everybody's trying to get to the health system at once. We need to quarantine, stay safe, stay inside, so that we can flatten that curve to where we do not exceed the demand, where the infrastructure can't handle it anymore. And I think that same concept applies here. So the question is, how do we do that? Well, our solution that we recommend is a thing called tertiary storage. We like to call it field storage. So we talk about really taking full control of the tanks that are already out in the field. So we're already servicing tanks. We already have a ton of steel that is already out in the world being serviced regularly. And so tertiary storage is actually gaining the ability to use that space inside all of those tanks and use that as storage. So we can fill a customer tank up to 80%. We can wait 6 months or a year until we have to fill it again. Once they reach a low point, 20%. This means that there would be 60% of tank capacity that is unused at any given time within a 6 to 12 month period. So the majority of the year, there's a lot of space in a standard tank that we're servicing that is just sitting there. So 60% of a standard 500-gallon tank is about 300 gallons. How many 500-gallon tanks do we have out in the field? How many 1,000-gallon tanks do we have out in the field? The average propane marketer, has around 2,500 tanks, I believe. With 100% conversion rate, you're looking at about 1 million gallons of storage that is out in the field total. So when you start looking at those numbers and you multiply your tertiary storage across tanks that are out in the field, adding a 30,000-gallon tank that yields 24,000 gallons seems pretty minuscule. So part of the concept behind this is we can take that tertiary storage, that field storage that's out there, and we can fill all those tanks up before winter ever gets here. So before September 1, before those peak prices start going up, and before winter gets here to where you're not delivering in the worst weather of the year, we can back a lot of that up into August, July, maybe even June if you go farther enough back, to where we're really taking that curve and we're flattening it out over the course of more months. We're increasing the demand in the off season and we're lowering it in the peak season, and really alleviating that pressure off of the infrastructure so that a lot of these common problems that we run into really don't have a chance of happening, or they're at least mitigated. And if and the propane marketers are using this concept are shielded against a lot of that. It's not a perfect system. It's not going to be completely free of those things, but it alleviates a lot of it. So what is the field storage exactly? Well, it is, I should probably explain here, this blue part right here, just in case it's not clear. So you're looking at your standard propane tank. On this tank image here, you see the blue portion. We've highlighted the actual storage space in that tank. So normally, if you're looking at any tank monitor that's out there, any type of graphic or image, you are looking at the tank level, the actual liquid level. From a tertiary storage or a field storage point of view, you're really looking at it upside down. You don't care as much about the liquid level in the tank as you care about how much storage is available in that tank. And to address a couple of things real quick, there's a few myths of tertiary storage that, some objections that we've heard or some questions. One of which is being it's difficult to properly manage. In the past, I would say that'd be true. We think we've solved a lot of that problem. The reliability of the technology, also something that I think we have solved as well. Historically, those two especially, the only way you could really have the field storage up and running properly would be with meters. You'd have to install actual meters, which means you have to install a meter inside the pipeline, which is the whole challenge. And a lot of times, up until recently, meters were not remotely accessed either. You had to physically drive and see the meter in person. Another myth is that it adds significant costs, which it can, and it does in certain ways. But it saves costs and it saves money well beyond what costs it actually adds. And so if you look at the upfront cost, it may seem like it's adding a bunch of significant costs. But if you look at the value over time, it repays for itself well above what the initial cost might be. The primary methods that have been used in the past are, we can use budget billing as kind of a way for it. You can use tank monitors, and you can use meters. You might be able to do one of those at a time, or you might be able to do tank monitoring and budget billing at the same time. What we're kind of proposing is to do all three of them at the same time, in a way. Not quite the same as budget billing, not quite the same as meters, but not quite the same as tank monitoring either. You take a piece of each one of them, you combine them together, and you have a system that works pretty well. And the pros and cons of each approach, I won't read through every single one of them, but to highlight a few, budget billing is not that accurate, it's not that reliable. And when it comes time to reconcile, you may be dealing with a large variance between what was actually billed and what was actually consumed. If you use just the tank monitoring, you're really looking at the same kind of problem. You're not looking at anything that's going to be accurate enough to really look at the usage. So as you bill customers per their usage, it's not temperature compensated. So you're looking at an issue where there could be reconciliation, a big variance there in the reconciliation. It's a better version of the budget billing. So it's going to be more accurate than standard budget billing generally, but it's not going to be really accurate enough, and it's not going to be as accurate as a meter would be. Meters are accurate and reliable, but they're also expensive and they're difficult to install, especially on existing tanks and existing customers. It's labor intensive, and it's pretty unrealistic to scale. So what we have been working on and developed, and what we're really excited to share with you today, is the concept of one tank. We are adding storage and safety and profit to the propane industry, and it is a less understood and underused solution. And we believe that it is a game changer for the propane industry and for the propane marketer. One Tank is the industry's first field storage and monitoring solution for propane dealers, developed by propane dealers and industry experts to eliminate costs and inefficiencies, insurance and operational risks of traditional bulk tank and propane storage and their traditional delivery. So by adding valuable insight and access into unused storage and into existing fuel tanks, One Tank enables the propane marketer to transfer fuel from bulk storage tanks to existing tanks out in the field in the off season when prices are low. And most importantly, it helps to address the number one concern of the customers, the consumers, a continuous fuel supply. This really addresses that biggest need. So to help explain the concept of One Tank, this graphic is about as close as we can get to explain it in one single image. So that tank in the middle is not an actual tank. So think of that middle tank as being an imaginary tank, to where all of your other tanks that are out in the field are combined into one big tank, or one tank. That's actually where the name One Tank came from. So One Tank is a combination of all your tanks that are out in the field brought into one big tank where you can see exactly how much inventory you have and exactly how much field storage you have at a glance. Where at any moment, you know your inventory levels and how much space you have out in the field that can be utilized at any time of the year, any time of the day. So where, you know, in the off season, you can look at and see how much field storage you have, and you can take steps to start filling those tanks before winter actually arrives. So getting those tanks filled before winter, it would avert supply interruptions and cost increases. You would enroll your customers with consumption billing or usage billing, meaning that your customers will pay for the fuel that they use as they use it. The same way that they would pay for a water bill or an electric bill, now we can do the same thing with propane, where they pay as they use it each month. So it will be accurate, it's temperature compensated, so the customer is going to really enjoy that because they get to pay their bills like they pay any of their other bills. And it really aligns the cost of propane with the majority of Americans' income stream. You know, a lot of Americans don't have $400 or $500 where they can just at any moment go and pay for a full tank of gas, which is why a lot of the other programs like budget billing, even pay exist. But the way this works is they use it and then they pay for it and they know what to expect. Another big thing that this does is it changes the business model from reactive to proactive. So instead of waiting until winter arrives and reacting to the situations at hand, we're being proactive and we're getting ahead of it. We're preparing for it. We're buying fuel ahead of time and we're deploying it before the problems really arrive. And so we are really changing the model to where instead of chasing supply, chasing steel, chasing our customers, we're getting ahead of it and we're putting it all into our control and we're filling the tanks whenever it's best for us and really getting ahead of the objectives at hand. Increases the ROI and customer satisfaction. You know, most customers are really going to enjoy being able to pay for what they use each month. They're already used to it with every other bill. I think most customers will sign up for that pretty quickly and easily. Enables access to tertiary storage, field storage, which we've already talked about that. And it really helps you endure events that cause the supply interruptions, which is the number of them. A lot of external factors that really play on how the industry and supply happens each year. What this does is it really builds resilience to where the propane operation will be much more resilient towards events that do cause supply interruptions and other challenges that the industry can throw at you. So we're kind of referencing the flatten the curve thing again. This isn't a perfect graph. This isn't an exact science. It's just to kind of communicate the concept. Actually, that the darker blue, I think, should actually be a little bit higher in the off-season months. But you get the point to where there's a certain level where propane infrastructure capacity, hits its limit. Without one tank, we're going to rise up above that line time and time again until something changes. With one tank, we can really take that curve a lot lower, and we can spread it out a lot further throughout the year, and keep ourselves from exceeding that infrastructure capacity that causes so many of these issues year in and year out. This is just a quick reference. Following the 2013-14 winter, a lot of the associations and state affiliates were actually recommending a lot of game plans that are similar to what we're talking about here, using field storage, pre-filling tanks, trying to do summer fill, bringing people on the summer fill programs. So a lot of the industry leaders have recognized that there's some sense here. There's some value to be had. The issue has been it's not always the easiest thing to do, but with now what we've built and with technology nowadays, it's becoming easier and easier to do. And I think now is the time to jump on it. as the industry environment and prices and supply all becomes much more, it's more volatile than I think it, it may have ever been. So kind of getting into some of the nitty gritty of the details here, what can one tank actually do for you? It's going to add storage at a fraction of the cost of your traditional bulk storage. It's going to help you take back control of your customers' tanks and deliver on your schedule, which means that you can fill those tanks whenever it's convenient for you, and you don't have to necessarily respond. You're not going to have those 3 p.m. on a Friday calls to go fill up a tank that's not going to make it through the weekend, or the calls the evening before Thanksgiving. A lot of those are more common than we like them to be in the industry, and so this really gets ahead of all of that. So it takes control of your customers' tanks, and it takes control of your own delivery schedule. It combines propane storage and tank monitoring, a lot of those same features, all into one affordable expense. And it allows you to gain freedom of pricing in your market. So one of the unique things about Skytracker and One Tank and what we built here, and because my father comes from the industry, we have a patented way of getting temperature compensated levels, which means that the metered usage, the consumption billing part of it, is temperature compensated. And so that allows you to gain freedom of pricing in your market to where you can sell, you can fill the tank at the price that the market is in the off season, but you can actually sell it at the price of the market in peak season, which really, it gives you freedom to where, what your margins are going to be, where you can really sell at a discount and really do some protective pricing for your customers, or you can make a significant margin in your product in the peak season time. It's going to increase resilience toward unforeseen industry pitfalls, which we've already talked about. It's going to obtain and keep year-round drivers. So because you're filling more in the off-season, your drivers have more to do in the off-season. So it makes sense to have less seasonal drivers and keep them busy more year-round. It's going to eliminate hours of service issues, again, so if you're not having to run around answering every call in the middle of winter and waiting at these long terminal lines where you need hours of service waivers. Some states, it's not too big of an issue. Other states, it's kind of a nightmare. So, and with that, you're reducing delivery in harsh weather conditions. And on top of it all, it'll improve your consumer experience with a branded mobile app. So with One Tank, you can give your customers a mobile app where they can track their own usage, their own tank levels, and they can actually communicate with you, the marketer, right there within the app. So where they don't have to check their tank, they don't have to call you, they don't have to send an email or any kind of inquiry. It's all right there, and they have access to all of it. And it will be having the Propane Marketer's logo and everything on there as well. So where it's branded. And just a quick comparison, a quick traditional cost for traditional bulk plant storage is around $4.17 a gallon, which, like I said, that number was actually calculated before a lot of these steel prices went up. So I'm sure it's even more than that now. The average storage per gallon, that's per gallon. I guess that got missed. $1.60 per gallon and $4.17 per gallon. Just to kind of give you a quick ratio and comparison between storage cost differences. If you want to expand that to a larger scale, this is just kind of a quick graphic. So bulk storage. So you're looking at the gray is bulk storage. The light blue is one tank storage if you yield a 40% gain, which that means if on average throughout all your tanks that you're filling, you gain 40% of usable storage within that tank across all the tanks that you have. And then dark blue is if you are able to gain 60%. So it really depends on the status of the tanks at the time. So this is a quick comparison between cost and how many gallons are actually yielded. So for $100,000, you're looking at about a 24,000 gallon yield with a 30,000 gallon tank. With one tank for that same cost, you're looking at about 64,000 gallons that have been yielded. That's a 40% average gain. And then if you actually are able to gain a 60% yield, well, now you're looking at close to 100,000 gallons of storage for the same price that a 30,000 gallon tank would offer. If you would like to actually learn more about how much one tank storage you have, we have a storage calculator on our website. And the slides, I believe, will be available to you after the webinar. If you click on this, the storage calculator, the little linked button there, it'll take you straight to it. Or you can go to onetank.com and under resources, you'll find it there at the bottom. It's a storage calculator where you can enter a number of tanks and enter the average size and what the level of those tanks are on average. That's a really quick way to do it. And there's also a button, once you're there, you can actually download a more detailed version of that where you can actually go through it tank by tank and get really an exact representation of how much storage you can yield for yourself. And we'd be happy to walk anyone through that who would be interested. So kind of quickly summarizing what one tank is and what the concept is that we're talking about here. We use Skytracker as the hardware device that monitors each tank. So that is, just a standard tank monitor that sits on top of the tank. It is a direct-to-satellite monitor. We are releasing a cellular module as well here, probably at the end of the year, if not the first of the coming year. So we will be having that available as well. Is powered by Skytracker Unlimited Tank Monitoring, which that is part of what we are releasing. Skytracker Unlimited means it's unlimited in its capabilities, where it will have satellite, it will have cellular, and we will have other connectivity modules as well. All that is forthcoming. And it holds patented temperature compensation calculations. So no one else can really do what we're doing because we have the patented method of temperature compensation. So that means that the usage billing is going to be accurate. It's going to be temperature compensated, and it is approved by national weights and measurement standards. And since the tank monitor readings are now temperature compensated, you can track that customer usage and bill per usage similar to a meter. And all that data is collected remotely, and it can actually connect to other accounting systems, API integrations. It allows the tank data to be sent directly to a multitude of accounting systems. This is just a quick graphic that kind of explains the cycle. I won't go through it in detail. You feel free to look into it a little more in depth later. But to quickly explain, it's a cycle of monitoring and accounting and delivery really combined, where you have your satellite cellular tank monitors that are transmitting to the website and to the mobile app for the customer, so you can access all that data through the software, which then gets also plugged into the accounting portion, which is in the bottom right there. And it can be API. You can use API to automatically integrate into it. We also can send flat files, recurring, daily. You can also export it and upload it into things like QuickBooks. So there's a multitude of versatility there, and it'll work with just about anything. And then since the ownership is retained by the dealer, so that's a point that we haven't really mentioned yet, but the consumer is being billed for what they use it, but all the fuel that's still sitting in the tank is still owned as an asset by the propane marketer, which is beneficial in a lot of ways, especially it's an asset that is added to the bottom line, for one thing. It owns ownership of that tank, and the remaining storage of each tank can then be filled at the convenience of the dealer while the customer enjoys seamless filling. So it eliminates wasted stops and saves time and energy and money. This is a glance at all three. So you can see our tank monitor device there that sits directly on the tank. Like I said, it's direct to satellite. It's plug and play. It's compatible with any ASME tank. It does all the remote ready gauges, and it does other things as well. It installs, with under 2 minutes, typically. Nothing to it. It's transmitting. You slap it on the tank, plug it in, and it's already doing its thing. The background is a shot of the home screen for the dashboard. So that glance right there, that tank that you're seeing, that is the one tank that we described earlier. That is a combination of all the tanks that are out in the field. And so you can see exactly how much storage you have, how much available storage you have, and how much inventory you have, and really what you have to work with at a glance. And then on the right there is the mobile app. It's a quick glance of what your customers, the consumers, would see. They can see their tank level, their battery life of the unit that's on their tank, the temperature history, their level history, their usage history, so they can actually break it down by month, and they can see exactly how many gallons they consumed each month. It's designed to really fit into your existing business. I won't go through each step here, but we really have designed it. We've taken the rocket science out of it, and we've made it pretty well plug and play. And we have people standing by to also help guide with the process to make sure that this is up and running still the most successful way that it can possibly be be onboarded. It's in our best interest to have our customers be successful. So we, like I was mentioning in the beginning, we want to go above and beyond to make sure that you're making money, you're solving headaches, and we're doing our part to make sure that you're really utilizing the whole concept and the whole software and the whole product to the fullest extent. And then you can extend those same kinds of savings or same kinds of reliability. You can go above and beyond for your customers, which you can actually use that as a tool, a competitive tool to really expand your market and to bring on new customers. That could be something that maybe you're the first one in your area, and now you have usage billing that you can offer customers if they convert to you, and you can have price protective plans. There's a lot of potential there to where you can really expand and bring a new tool to your area for your customers. I'm also excited to present. So I mentioned my father a couple of times throughout the presentation here. I wanted to bring him on because he has really lived through a lot of this as a propane marketer and on the propane side for a number of years. And then he began the Skytrak production, 15, 20 years ago now. So he's still been in the propane industry, but just on the tank monitoring side. So he's had 48 consecutive years in the propane industry, 13 years on the Missouri Gas Association Board of Directors, serving as a chairman as well. He's also the one who authored the first checkoff program, which is now known as PERC. That was originated, I believe, in the back of a pickup truck by my father, who wrote it, 30-something years ago now. He was the Missouri State Director to the NPGA's Market Development Committees, past Director at Large for Illinois Gas Association. He conceived and engineered the original Skytrak, really setting the stage for tank monitoring today. He was the former Director of National Advertising and Promotions for Williams Energy, Director of National Accounts, where Humphrey's department became Energy Consultants for General Electric, Wendy's, Pizza Hut, KOA, NASA. He has a pretty robust resume, especially for the propane industry. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Rick Humphrey to tell a little bit of his story. So if you're ready, Rick, take it away. I think you may be on mute. We still can't hear you.
Still can't hear me.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. Well, thank you, Brian and Aurora and Joseph, for making this here possible. As Brian said, I'm kind of an old gasser. So, but I want to make a point too that Brian started with us when he was in high school when we was first developing Skytracker, and there he worked in the warehouse and with wiring and battery packs. So he started in this business from the ground up. But he's been around the propane business all of his life too. I really have also. My uncle owned a propane company in Missouri, and my neighbor was one of those that started Gas and Doxol, which is today owned by Feral Gas, a part of Feral Gas. But so I've been around it since I've been 7 years old too. My story though, I wanted to get the point across is fuel supply. As managing 32 operations in 5 states, and then as area VP, and for 3 of the major corporations, then also having my own independent company, we was also operating in 5 states and 3 in the Southwest. I've experienced shortages in product. It's a reoccurring systemic problem in the industry. And I'm going to start with just the fact of the bicentennial year of 1976 was a very mild winter. We had bought a lot of product, our fuel supply had, and as a result, we used that product during the summer of 76. We was also, for the first time, going to computers. The 3 computers that we had for the Midwest region were about the size of a Yukon Denali. Just give you an idea. Then your phone probably has more power than any one of those did, or all 3 of them did. The point is, we had take-or-pay arrangements. We took the product, and rather than trying to pay the storage, the demurrage on it, we tried to use it in the summer of 76 and the fall and getting into early winter. The problem was we got hit with a strong winter, a heavy winter. As a result, our pipeline ratio wasn't there. That's still a problem today. And we also had the issue with the Department of Energy, or Federal Energy Administration at that time, the FEO 17s. And then it was combined as something similar today that was the Carter administration. We went from 3,200, 3,300 wells per year being drilled in the United States to 0 during that period. And depending on OPEC, and I think there was a question that I saw earlier regarding our future dependence on OPEC. So I think that's pretty logical, pretty probable. Pipeline terminals increased. The weather was horrible, snow and ice. It was a tremendously snow year. We did short fills, which meant we had to go back the following week to not only top those back off again, but to also hit the new tanks coming on board. Even though we was delivering by degree days, it just simply didn't work. We ordered 30,000 jumbo rail cars from the oil sands. They didn't arrive till
your audio, we can't hear you again. I'm not sure what happened. No. Why don't you here switch computers here. Yeah, we're conveniently here in the same area, so I'm gonna have him come over here. You guys can hear me, okay? I'm assuming so.
I'll stand behind you here. Okay, sorry about the musical chairs there. But as I was saying, I wrote to 287,000 customers to try to explain why we let them run out of gas. We lost quite a few customers that year. I actually ended up spending $3 million in my capacity as advertising promotion to mitigate those losses, and until we could get a new supply department going, and hired the HEHAW staff and gang, particularly Minnie Pearl, George Lindsay, and Grandpa Jones. That was a lot of fun, but the point is we had to do that. About this time, we decided to change our method of supply, and we hired James Bertelsmeyer, Dwayne Willingham, and Marty Laram. All those you know them from the industry too. That got us through. They assured me and our operations that we was going to have fuel supply, and they performed to what they proposed a number of times for the next few years. Still had a few spot shortages here and there, but not until the winter of 1987 did we have a problem again. That was quickly repeated again. The timing got a little shorter. In 1989, we were again, and the industry was in the Midwest was in a very deep supply interruption phase. We had days of below zero temperature, never got above zero. And there was 2 weeks there, the nights were 30 degrees below and across the mid-continent. Had 12-hour terminal waits at the pipeline, and from that, we ended up trying to mitigate that damage as an industry for the state of Missouri. When I was on the board, we got a $10 million MOBUX program approved by State Treasurer Wendell Bailey that helped propane marketers then to add more storage to their plants. That was also the impetus that I was the first marketer to meet with the state execs for Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri, and we decided we was going to do a checkoff program one way or the other. At least our states was going to have it. Today, that's called MOPERC, and Brian was right. I wrote that in the back of our operations manager's pickup truck on the way back from building 2 operations plants in Kingman, one in Kingman, Arizona, one in Lake Havasu. Having had enough of that, that was about the same time that I started working with and developing Skytracker, and the first transmissions from Skytracker occurred about that time in the late 80s, and I communicated that within 15 minutes to some of the folks I knew in the industry, and including Pat Walsh, who was with Feral Gas. He passed away here a couple of years ago. Anyway, point is I wanted to have degree day recording on Skytracker, Julian day logs. That set the basis for temperature compensation, and in the patented ability of how we take the temperature at a tank and the manner we do it with. That's been approved by Dennis Johansson with National Measurement Standards for be applicable in all states. There's a few little patented processes we do, and with that, we had Skytracker not only as a monitor, but we also brought it out as a safety device, primarily that just happened to do monitoring. We report out of ordinary event notices too. And that opened the door for one tank, which Brian has taken off and produced from there. The one tank allows the dealer to gain control of their tanks. Before that, think about this, your customers have had control of your steel. Now one tank gives that back to you. Flattens the curve, as Brian has talked about, and just want to kind of go to the fact that in 2014, Brian told you about what we experienced there and the industry, and we're seeing some similarities in 2021 to what happened in 2014. I'll leave you with this, that on Tuesday, the 28th, September 28th, Fox Business published a report. I'd encourage you to go to that, read it, as far as where we're dangerously low in the energy supplies today. And I did talk to Jerry Brick, one of the past chairmen of MPGA at the North Central Convention last month, and he sees similarities too. He's very concerned about our supply, particularly in the northern tier. Same thing was issued by Dan Benning with the Colorado Association today, and with Tom Janicki, another leader in the industry. Spoke to him also. So the only way that we see out of this is one tank. We do have to remember that this is America, so some assembly is always required. And but Skytracker is the one that'll reduce your assembly to less than 1 minute when you put it on the tank. With that, I want to turn this back over to Brian. And so we'll play musical chairs once more.
All right. Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you for giving us a little bit of insight in the history there. As we've seen, history has repeated itself, and so even if we get by this winter, at some point we're going to be dealing with a lot of these issues time and time again. That pretty much concludes the presentation. I don't know if we have any questions. We do. I just want to let you guys know, please feel free to contact us through our website or by email at any time. Please also know that we are running a promotion right now to where we're running 50 Skytrackers at $375 a month, which is, I think it's the lowest we've ever actually been able to sell Skytrackers for. And that is hardware and monitoring and everything combined. So, and that is also the ability to yield field storage and other things as well. Everything we just talked about is all included in that. So that concludes the presentation here. I don't know if we want to do any Q&A or if there's time left or anything like that. I'll hand it back over to you, Aurora.
Great. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Rick. That was a great presentation. We are just going to wrap up now for the sake of time. And I'm going to go over a couple of closing remarks. So thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar, How to Add Propane Storage Affordably Despite the Steel Shortage, brought to you by LP Gas Magazine and our sponsor of the event, One Tank. If you have any additional questions for myself or our speakers, you can reach out to us directly via the email addresses you see on the slide. The resources panel houses a PDF of today's presentation slides, which you can download. To access this panel, click the green icon at the far right end of the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. A recording of this webinar will be emailed to you tomorrow and posted to lpgasmagazine.com/webinars. Upcoming webinars from LP Gas Magazine also will be posted to that page. Thank you all for attending, and we hope you'll join us for another great webinar.